Hello and welcome to WPP Commerce. I'm Debbie Ellison, Global Chief Digital Officer for VMLY&R Commerce. I'm so pleased to welcome Rhonda Foxx, Head of Social Equity Policies and Engagements at Intel Corporation. Rhonda, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And thank you so much for joining us. We've got lots to discuss, but what I'd love to do is just ground the audience in learning a bit about your background, your successful career to date, your role at Intel, and how you're really shaping the future of technology there.
Well, that is a lovely introduction. Let's see. I have been at Intel almost exactly 8 months. I came to Intel after about a decade working in U.S. politics and policy. The unique thing about my career, I only worked for women, members of Congress, becoming the youngest woman of color chief of staff on Capitol Hill at the time. I did that role for 5 years. And after I finished working for 6 very courageous and powerful women, I decided to run for Congress myself. I ran on a criminal justice platform because of my own personal experiences. And when that campaign ended, I came in second. I knew I wanted to continue shaping better dialogues, discourses, also improving my community. And Intel had a position where it really was about figuring out corporate purpose and how do we truly live up to our mission of being world changing and enriching all lives through our technology and innovation. And so jumped on this opportunity. It's my first stint in the private sector, but I got to tell you, Intel is a world-class organization and glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so pleased, and I'm really glad that you've joined us, as I said again today. And just kind of carrying on from the points you made around kind of social inclusion and diversity, I was really pleased to learn that VMLY&R and Intel have both been recognised by the HRC's Corporate Equality Index Award. I was even more impressed to hear that Intel have developed its own inclusivity index. Could you tell me a little bit more about how that's come about, what you're learning so far and how that's being applied at Intel?
Yeah, so first, is the realization that Intel is a high-tech company, but we've been around for over 50 years, and diversity, equity, and inclusion have been steadfast parts of our evolution since our inception. And so we're very proud with the HRC recognition, but with that comes the responsibility of not just raising the bar for ourselves, but as a leader that's been around for over 50 years, raising the bar for industry. And so later in the month, you'll see a little bit more about our new index, our new effort to make diversity, equity, and inclusion not one thing specific to one company, but something that we can all go at together, because working in our individual silos hasn't worked. We haven't moved the needle or the ball as much as we'd like. So coming together, holding each other accountable, figuring out the best practices is key to that. But what I do want to highlight and acknowledge is that just recently, last week, Intel named our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Dawn Jones, and I think she's going to do marvelous and spectacular things through this industry coalition, and hopefully we can really move the ball forward, and we can see substantial continued progress, not only at Intel, but across the industry in general.
And I really love that, Rhonda. I love that you're talking about the changes that you can make within the industry, within the business, but also within the industry and outside of the business. I don't think there's going to be a conversation that's going to happen over the course of these 2 days that isn't going to talk about the pandemic and its impact on technology and on commerce. A couple of stats that I've been reading is that, the increase of, cashless payments has increased by 150% because of the pandemic. And actually our own research through WPP has said that 40% of consumers could see a cashless society in the very near future. I'd love your thoughts on how you think that acceleration of technology and innovation is impacting underrepresented communities, and what job there is to be done for businesses and particularly Intel in helping support those communities in that space.
Yeah, so first, I think we were cognizant of this to some degree prior to the global pandemic, that we are on the precipice of a fourth industrial revolution. And if we don't get equity and equality correct with this industrial revolution, we are going to permanently leave communities and people behind. But what we saw with the global pandemic, married with a summer of racial unrest and tension in the United States alone, we're further behind on our equity and equality goals than we ever anticipated. So it put a whole new light on some of the divides and divisions that we see. And so as we move forward with this digital transformation that we are in, because we're not going backwards. You can't, be in your home for a year using the internet, figuring out that you can actually work and be productive at home like you can in a site for your employer. So we're not necessarily going back. And so the question is, what can we implement to ensure we're not leaving those communities behind? And at Intel, we're very firm on the belief that we have a purpose to be world changing and to enrich the lives of every person on earth. So that means looking at the digital divide. It means looking at the other 50% of the world that's not digitally connected and figuring out what can we do. And it's not the easy solution, or not even easy, but it's not the simple solution of providing broadband. It's making sure people have access to affordable devices. We take that very serious. Another thing at Intel, we're very cognizant that one of the next divides, if we don't get this right, is the PC versus the tablet versus the cell phone. Do students, as they're learning, have access to PCs? That's the key to telemedicine and other resources that we're going to want to make sure all communities have. And then it's also the learning component, digital readiness. I could give you broadband, I could give you a device, but do you know how to use those tools and skills? And so you'll see in the upcoming months, Intel really double down on a key initiative that we have. It's called AI for Youth and AI for Educators, where we go into schools, community colleges, and do the digital readiness and learning, because it's good to have the device, it's good to have broadband, but you've got to have the digital readiness. And then also with that a lot of folks are still trying to figure out, how do we get a federal framework or a national framework around privacy? If people don't feel secure with using the internet, you're not going to use it. And so we have a responsibility not just to deploy technologies, but to look at some of these issues. And the final thing I'd say is, you see a lot of our industry colleagues talk about the rural divide between rural communities and non-rural communities. But we can't forget, specifically when you're talking about Black demographics, the urban disconnect and divide. And that's very real. And we see this it's very clear with collegiate institutions based in urban centers, a lot of historically Black colleges and universities, as well as other minority serving institutions. They're still struggling with disconnects because they're either in urban or rural settings. And that's a thing that we all got to stop and think about. Why would a major college struggle with connectivity? Because of where it's located. We can't afford that anymore in this new digital transformation era.
Absolutely. I love hearing everything that Intel's really doing to help those communities really not get left behind, Rhonda. And it's really valiant efforts, and it's fantastic to hear that there is some corporate social responsibility in ensuring that the acceleration of innovation and technology isn't leaving people behind. But that role isn't just for corporates, right? So I know that you have some thoughts on kind of the technological innovations that are coming from government, and what do you see their role is in terms of, really understanding the digital divide specifically for Black communities, and what they should really be doing to help lessen the impact of that divide?
Yeah, so I think this global pandemic has made it very clear. One thing, we need greater public-private partnership. The industry can't go at this alone. Governments cannot go at this alone. It takes all of us working together to ensure we're truly leaving no community behind or having unintended consequences behind the deployment of technologies. So we've really got to come together. I think one of the big things that's been exciting to me is to see the acting commissioner of the FCC talk very clearly about using more data. At Intel, we're a data-centric company. We're driven by the data as the world's leading data scientist. And so when you hear, as we talk about the digital divide and the digital transformation, truly using more data to figure out where do we have areas that are not connected. We can tell more precisely where that is through precision mapping. And once we do that precision mapping, we can deploy solutions that really get to the crux of the matter and the issue. And so that's something we're very encouraged about. I think government has to work with the private sector to invest more in precision mapping so that we're not just throwing darts into the dark, but we're really going after the bullseye and we know where we need to target. And then beyond that, it's diving into the divides between what device do you have access to. It was shocking. I was talking to a young man in DC, and I didn't even think about it, but he told me, I didn't get my first computer until I started my job at 22. That's shocking. And you don't think about that. But that's something we've got to all be cognizant of, both the private sector as well as the government sector, that we've got to look at this holistically. It's going to have implications not only on learning, but how we receive our health care and what kind of jobs we can compete for the future. So I think if we're really going to get serious about this, we're going to be clear. We're going to be unabashed in saying people of color have far too often been left behind by both private sector as well as government. So now we've got to step that up. And then we're not just going to guess about the solution or the problem. We're going to use data to tell us specifically what that problem is, and then implement data-driven solutions to address that. And that starts with broadband immediately.
Absolutely, Rhonda. And I love the intention, how intentional some of these kind of programs and initiatives are. One of the things that I've learned about the Intel initiative, the Pandemic Response Technology Initiative, that has, seen Intel invest time and resources into supporting economic recovery, into accelerating the technology advancements in healthcare and education. Can you tell us more about that initiative and what it hopes to achieve in the next 5 years?
Yeah, and I am really excited. I'm containing my excitement because we launched the Pandemic Response Technology Initiative when the gravity of the global pandemic came to light. But we are so proud to announce just last week or the week before that we've extended that Pandemic Response Initiative into the Intel Rise Technology Initiative. And so at the start of the global pandemic, Intel made a very bold goal. It said, look, we're going to do whatever it takes to become the most responsible, inclusive, and sustainable business, all of which would be enabled by our technology and our people. And so we saw the results of that pandemic response technology initiative, where we were able to deploy digital readiness as well as devices to communities hit most hard by the global pandemic. One community in general, which is near to us because of our locations in Arizona and New Mexico, was our Native American communities. And on tribal communities. And so we worked double overtime to ensure those communities were digitally connected, that their students had devices. And we're very proud about that. And so now you'll see us move into this RISE initiative, where we are working with our industry colleagues, again, not just by ourselves, but with industry colleagues, to look at social equity and inequality, to look at environmental justice and environmental protections, education, things that are at the fundamental core of who we are as a company. But now we're deploying our time, our resources, and our skills to look at how can we really be world changing in these critical areas. So really excited to see that Pandemic Response Technology Initiative transform into something even larger that will have more of a global impact in all of the communities that we serve and represent. So we are really excited about that transformation.
And I'm really looking forward to charting its success as well, Rhonda. So can't wait to kind of keep a track of that. Finally, I'd love to hear about the global campaign that you guys are launching, right? Celebrating IT professionals who have kept us running, actually, in the world turning in light of the pandemic. I'd love to hear more about that and why it's so important to celebrate, IT professionals in our industries.
Yeah, so before even going in that, I will tell you a personal story. When I finished my tenure on Capitol Hill and finished running for office, didn't know where I wanted to go. And I had to really research different companies. And one of the very impressive things that drove me to Intel is the powerful women that are doing powerful things in the technology and the business space, between shaping responsible technologies deployments, shaping up a very inclusive and diverse workforce, rebranding the company, looking at, what our corporate mission is and our purpose and how do you embed that. But one of the women at the top of that is our Chief Information Officer, Archie Discus. And seeing her and her team really deploy an apparatus like that overnight that connected our workforce. Our workforce by itself is over 110,000 people situated globally. To be able to, while you're dealing with your own complexities as a person in a global pandemic, to transform this workforce to being able to work from home, that's monumental. And it's that learning and understanding that we will use to deploy as we strive as a company to help with the digital transformation and ensuring it's equitable. But Archie is one of those women, her teams, that have really set the tone and the tenor for how we work from home, how that's possible. And all of that is powered by our vPro technology. And so we're really excited about that. It's when you mix the passion of people with the power of technology, that's how you're transformative. And that's the crux of Intel.
I fundamentally believe that, Rhonda, and I really love the sound of this global campaign. As I said, it's so easy to kind of overlook the valiant efforts of, IT professionals behind, the fact that we're able to work from home, the fact that, as I said, the world is keeping turning, and that there are people working really, really hard to really kind of transform the world in which we're working. So again, I can't wait to hear more about that campaign and to see that. I know it's a multi-market campaign, so I know a lot of us will get to kind of see the fruits of that.
Absolutely. And those are our unsung heroes. None of this would be possible. This interview wouldn't be possible. Me speaking to you today wouldn't be possible if not for those folks. And the realities are, it's not going to get easier. It's going to get more complex. But they've been at the front lines figuring this out. And so we're very appreciative, and we will support our IT leaders, our IT technologists, as we continue this transformation. So we're excited. Stay tuned for more, but always remember the power of women to lead and execute.
Absolutely, Rhonda. I'm absolutely supportive of that message. I really want to thank you so much for joining us today. I think you've really proved the fact that, technology can help build people, build communities, build businesses. And I really loved hearing everything that you had to say about your own personal experience, everything that Intel's doing to really transform the business inside and outside into society and impacting really positively. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with me today, and I really look forward again to charting your success and following you. Thank you again so much for joining us at WPP Commerce.
Yes. And thank you for having me, and have a great day.
You too.